Should you move from where you live to be in a safer place for when SHTF happens? Stay tuned for more thoughts from my head on that very subject. Hey folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead and the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. So today I'm thinking, should you continue living in a place that you live if you know for a fact it is unsafe for your family, for you and your family, if the big one happens, the big balloon blows up? And I'm gonna pick on an area that I pick on every once in a while, and I think most of you that might live in that area are okay with it. So you're gonna be my guinea pig for today, and I'm gonna talk about California and use you as an example. For those of you that aren't aware, there's some seismic activity going on in Southern California. About a week ago, one of those geological survey groups or whatever stated that one of the fault lines seems to be increasing activity and could be, getting ready for the big one. And from what I was reading this morning, I guess yesterday, there was 9 small quakes in Southern California area. So it's very possible that, another big one. The report that I read like a week ago was saying that it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of an 8.0. That could do some major damage to Southern California. And yet, it is one of the most concentrated populations on this planet. People continue to live there, and they're not all liberals. I mean, I pick on California for the amount of liberals, and certainly there are many, but there are many conservatives. There are many preppers, actually, gun owners and stuff that continue to live in California, and even Southern California. And I know that Northern California is different, even though they have the same, they still are bound by the same state laws. But I understand the, political makeup is a little different in areas of Northern California. And we're not going to go into that today. But there are still many preparedness-minded, homestead-minded, gun owners that live in Southern California. And as it gets worse there politically, and as the ever-increasing risk of California being a dangerous place to live, if some big thing happens, whether it's an earthquake or political breakdown or economic breakdown or whatever it is, it brings up that question of, do you continue to live? How do you make that move? Is it as easy as it of just saying, well, just move, just pack up your bags and move? It's not always easy for everyone. There's money involved. Obviously, it costs money to move. It costs money to find a place to live. You have all the finances. How are you going to switch jobs? Do you have to find a new job? How are you going to survive when you get to where you're living? That aspect. Then there's family and friends. You may have family and friends there, and it's difficult to pull yourself away from them. And not just the ones that live around you, but also your own family. Maybe you're married, your spouse, you have kids, and maybe they're not on board with doing that. They don't want to leave. They like that area. And is as bad as California, especially Southern California, is when it comes to the politics of it and the obvious dangers and how society is kind of collapsing in a lot of ways, with the increased homelessness and illegals and drugs and all that kind of stuff. It is a beautiful place to live. They have a beautiful climate and very, scenic areas to live in. So, you could make a good argument that it's still a beautiful place to live. So we come to this question of how do we do that? And do we do that? To start off with, I can't answer that for you. That is a question that only you and your family can come up with. But I think that the discussion we can talk about, and it's very worth talking about. It's something that we should do and that you should do. If you find yourself in one of those areas, and it doesn't have to be Southern California, it could just be a large population area, big city, St. Louis, Dallas, Chicago, Denver, or just areas that the cost of living, the restrictions on how to live more self-sufficient are there. Let me start off telling you a little story, true story of a friend of mine that I met back in college. And he was from Chicago, and he was a gang member in Chicago, and I can't remember which gang exactly, but he was in a serious hardcore gang, you know, not one of these kind of guys that talk about it. It was legit. He had bullet wounds and knife scars, stabbing scars on his body from the kind of life that he lived, and he would tell just horrific stories of how he lived his life in that gang, and that he said that he had this desire to get out of it, and everyone told him that, you know, when you're in a gang like that, you don't just walk away, you can't just leave, you're stuck there. And he told me, he said he was determined that he was going to leave, and he saved up enough money for a bus ticket, and he picked a location, a city that he said he had no clue anything about this city. He'd never heard of it really. I mean, didn't know anything about it, what was there. He packed a small bag of his personal belongings, got on that bus, and left. And he never went back. He ended up through things in his life, got into college, got some scholarships, and the last time I talked to him, he was in med school, on his way to becoming a doctor. And so there's a real life success story. Now, he was single, didn't have a wife and kids, so I understand that has a big play into this equation. But the point is that he realized the danger of where he lived, and it, just like ripping a Band-Aid off, he walked away from it. But that's not as easy as that when it comes to having a wife or a husband and having children. It is more difficult, and I do understand that. But I think as things increase politically, as the risk of natural problems, natural disaster problems increase, the increase of financial collapse that we see happening around us, we see this buildup constantly, and we never know when that balloon is going to pop. But indications are that something's going to pop, you know, soon. And when I say soon, it could be months or, you know, years. But definitely a chance that something could happen. And if you find yourself living in an area that you know good and well that if one of those things happened, it's going to, you know, just living where you're at is going to be difficult. It's going to be a risk. It's going to increase your danger for your family. And then I think it's time for you to start thinking about that. Start planning of where you need to live that's going to be safe for your family. As many of you know that have watched my channel, any of you that have watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I personally feel the Ozarks is one of those places that's nearly perfect when it comes to living a self-sufficient and preparedness lifestyle. Southern Missouri, northern Ozarks, northern Arkansas Ozarks are a good place and extremely affordable still. But they're not the only place, so do the research. Try to find a place that will work for you and start making plans. You have to convince your family of this, of course, and that may be the biggest hurdle you will overcome, is trying to explain to them if they're not on board with prepping, if they're not on board with homesteading, it's going to be difficult. So that's going to be your first hurdle, is to get them to the point that they realize that this is necessary. And you may not ever fully get them on board. You just may have to kind of grab the bull by the horns as best as you can and start leading them in that direction. And then establish an area, or at least 2 or 3 options of where you want to go. And then you just have to start doing it. You maybe have a lease that you have to do, to get out from under. Maybe you have to sell your home. These are all things that are obvious that you have to, break yourself away from these legal obligations. But doing this isn't quite as difficult as I think a lot of people think. I think they get so focused on, how it's just, there's such a great burden to do this, to pack up and move to a completely different location and take on a new lifestyle, that it becomes so overbearing. And I know there's a lot of people that, and I even do this, talk about, urban preparedness and, inner city preparedness and things. And we need to talk about those things because there's going to be so many people in those areas. But if there's any possibility that you can move out of those areas and into an area that is, safer for your family and where you can better able to take care of them and survive, then I would certainly advise you to start making plans to do just that. Because you know, it's so much easier to survive and to thrive with your family when you're in an area that you can grow your own food, that you can hunt your own food, that you're not bombarded with such a high population density around you. I mean, these are just common sense, and I don't know that anyone could really make a legitimate argument against that. I mean, I'm not saying it's all positive of living out in the country or out in the woods, but there's certainly much more advantages to that in the long term. You know, again, I understand the difficulty of this. You know, it's hard to just rip that Band-Aid away and move away. But it's something that you need to start planning on. You know, as far as money, I was reading something a few weeks back that the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment in certain places in Southern California is as high as $3,700 a month. $3,700 a month is just ridiculous to me to pay for rent, especially for a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, I could rent, if I could find it, I could rent a huge ranch for that price. You know, that monthly cost, even if I could find one. I don't even know if they would exist around here. But $3,700 a month is crazy. And you might say, well, there's no way, you know, if I'm living in Southern California and I'm making $200,000 a year, I've looked. I can't find a job like this in Missouri, in Southern Missouri, that making this kind of money. Well, you're probably not. You're correct on that. You know, unless you're a doctor or an attorney or something like that, you're probably not going to move to the Ozarks and make $200,000 a year. But guess what? You don't need to make $200,000 a year. That's the beauty of moving out to places like the Ozarks or the certain areas of the Appalachian Mountains, or you know, certain areas of just, you know, the Midwest. The Midwest is great for, in a lot of places, for homesteading and prepping. You don't have to make $250,000 a year. You may only make $40,000 a year, and you could pull it off. You may make less and you may make more, but the point is, understand that everything is relative. You know, you're not going to pay $3,700 a month for rent in the Ozarks. You could, you know, live in a nice apartment, 3-4 bedroom apartment for $700 a month. Maybe a little bit more than that, but certainly not much. And I'm talking a nice place, not a dump. You have to put those things into context, that yeah, you're not going to make that kind of money when you move out in the country, but there's also sacrifices you have to make. You know, you may not have 2 brand new cars. Maybe you need to get out from under those. Maybe you need to sell those cars and try to find something used that you can pay cash for. You know, other things, you know, sell the house if you can, and maybe you can make some money off of that house, enough money to start paying off debts, get out from under the debt that you have. When you do that, you start reducing your financial burden, then you certainly don't need to make that kind of money. And I think that's a lot of the initial draw to a lot of these cities is, man, you can make a whole lot more money, which is certainly true. But you're also going to pay a lot more money to live there. And I hear people all the time, you know, well, there's no jobs out in the country. There's no jobs in the Ozarks, and that's not true. I see job postings all the time. Again, they're not going to be $150,000 a year, but there's definitely jobs there. You just have to be willing to make sacrifices, and that's part of what it means to be a parent, a father, a mother. Is you have to make sacrifices for your family. You know, your family may not be able to afford all the things that you do with the current job that you have. But if you know that you're providing them a safe and secure and much more fulfilling lifestyle, to me, I think it's worth it. So we have to, you know, understand that there are, you know, things you have to give up. You know, things that you have to realize that this is a little fat that I have to lean up and cut off of the meat, you know, to lean up that meat in our family. But if you have to do that, to take care of your family, I feel personally it's worth it. And again, I think the biggest hurdle you're going to have to come up against is getting the rest of your family on board. If you start to do that, maybe take them out in the woods more. Maybe there's local farms that will allow you to visit. Maybe they'll even allow you to kind of get involved with some of their farm chores. Going out into the woods and going camping. Doing these types of things while you still live in the city can open up your family to, you know, the prospect of living like that, and, you know, show them videos of how people live like that, and show them that it's not as ridiculously hard as it may look. That it is something that you can do, you and your family can do successfully with a little time and a little education and a little practice. You can make this move. And in the end, it will be worth it. I've seen personally how it can change a child's behavior and personality from living in a city environment, going to a public school, and sitting in front of a TV all day, and then taking them and living in the country where they're not sitting in front of a TV or video game all the time, and they're experiencing life in a more full way, and it drastically can change them. So there's so many benefits to it, not just the preparedness part, not just the homesteading part, but the real life fulfilling part about living out like that. And don't get so caught up in this idea that it's too hard, I can't do it, there's too much, it's too complicated. It's just too complicated to do that, and we're just stuck here. You know, I've got too good of a job, I've got too many connections, I just can't make that move. You can. You know, my friend that moved away from the gangs, you know, if he can do that, so can you. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be easy. But if it means the protection and the safety and the survival of your family, I think we're at a place, if we're not beyond that place, that we have to start taking those things seriously and not just staying where we are because it's comfortable. All right. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.